Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Millers in Marriage, and this is a new drama coming your way from Republic Pictures and writer-director Edward Burns, who also stars in the film as one of the many middle-aged people who are in relationships that this film explores their dynamics. And this film focuses on three married couples as they get to that point in their life where their past kids move. If they had kids, they've moved out. And they're starting to get to being in marriages for like 15 years and really processing if their relationships are really what they want or need at this point, if how they're exploring those relationships. And this film, it certainly has a bit of a play feel. At times the film doesn't feel very cinematic, and it feels a little bit cold and distant in terms of its presentation. But I think overall I really appreciate the film for being something mature and how it navigates these complex relationships and these situations that these characters find themselves in. This isn't like an over-the-top melodramatic kind of experience. These are people in long-term relationships or trying to navigate, new places in their lives, how they've evolved. And I don't think all of these stories are equal. One in particular I feel was a bit weaker than the rest. It definitely is the more morally complex of them, just didn't feel as connected. And that really focuses on Juliana Margulies' Maggie and her husband, Campbell Scott's Nick. And both of them are writers in very different ways. Nick is very, through the process and spends a lot of time. And she's pulling upon life around her and making things that are more accessible, more commercial, and maybe a little too personal, and how that dynamic influences their relationship. And she's having an affair with Brian Darcy James's Dennis, and how I feel like that relationship's the least compelling from a viewer standpoint, because both of them are pretty insufferable, and it's hard to really side with either of them. But it is interesting in terms of the complexity of how them both being writers and artists and processing through that, on top of them being together for so long and maybe feeling disconnected from each other, and Maggie seeking out relationships elsewhere. Brian Darcy James' Dennis is kind of just like a scummy, just like sleeping with all the attractive middle-aged women in the area. And the other two stories I think are pretty interesting, especially the one that I feel like you get the most empathy and connection with is you have Gretchen Mall's Eve, who's a former musician herself, and her husband Patrick Wilson, who's probably the most detestable character in the film. There's not a whole lot of complexity to him. He's a drunk, he's egotistical, he is not a good husband, he was never a good father. And why she's still with him, he, just wants her to be able to make him some pasta and be there to be this housewife. And she had these aspirations, but then she has Benjamin Bratt's character, who's a music critic, come into her life, seeking to interview him, but winds up interviewing her for this book that he's writing. And it really sparks something in her, and potentially considering having an affair with Benjamin Bratt's character. And there's some complexity there, and I appreciate the journey that Mall's character Eve goes on in this film. And, the film challenges her as a wife, it challenges her as a former musician, and as a woman at this point in her life who's too apprehensive about, you can't have a new beginning at this point in your life, but you can. And it's interesting seeing her go through that process. And then the third storyline, you have a bit of a love triangle here with director Edward Burns' Andy, who I like him as a character, and he plays him very well. Burns, previously in films like Saving Private Ryan, he brings a lot of just casual, down-to-earth, grounded kind of experience to this character. But there is some naivete in there, and he definitely has this lingering connection to his soon-to-be ex-wife, but not ex-wife yet, Marina Baccarin's Tina, who is very attractive, very alluring, and very controlling. And when Andy's moving on, dating Renee, one of her former colleagues and friends, played by Minnie Driver, she becomes jealous and she tries to insert herself back into this situation. And seeing how Andy processes this, and whether Tina's sincere or she's just losing control and wants to gain that upper hand back, you see Andy trying to navigate this new relationship with Renee. And I love Minnie Driver. She's fantastic. And Marina Baccarin. They're two of the most charismatic performers in this film. And really enjoy watching them on screen. And it plays an interesting piece for Burns to be playing off each of them. And things don't necessarily wrap up in a nice way for any of them, but I appreciate how their story navigates this complex situation with tact and with some maturity and making some hard decisions. There's also some elements in how the story is told in terms of, hey, you're missing a piece, and that piece is revealed later to add some depth to the story and the dynamics that are going on screen. I thought that was a fresh take with how Burton structured the film. And in general, I just appreciated this film for being a mature drama that navigates relationships in a way that doesn't feel too like you're watching a movie, too melodramatic. And I think this is a great cast of actors, and I think they do a lot with the characters that they're given. And overall, I really appreciated the experience watching them in this film. But those are my thoughts on Millers in Marriage. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.